Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 John Deere Classic Data Dive Show. We got a lot to get into. We're going to look at our first look at the forecast for Silvis, Illinois. We're going to take a look at some deep, detailed data around TPC Deere Run. We're going to look at some prior leaderboards, and we're going to take a look at some prior performance for the players that are in the field this week. There have been a few field changes, so I'll make sure to fill you in with all of those. Got a lot to cover. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf wagerer and golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where earlier today I posted some research around the past 10 winners of the John Deere Classic at TPC Deere Run. The pattern that those past winners share, and the players in the field this week who share or fit that pattern. Quite an interesting list of names that popped up with that. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation, and he continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of recent form and course history. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night after calls as we continue the DFS talk over there. It's always a great discussion. The only way you're going to be able to join us is, again, if you are subscribed to his article. So make sure you are doing that and supporting him over on social media. Again, his handle's in the description. Lastly, we are live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. In addition to any Rocket Mortgage success that you had, did you fire off any wagers today? What do you think of the big name withdrawals earlier today? Who do you think's the favorite now? All of that good stuff. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 John Deere Classic. And we normally start over at Windfinder and the extended forecast, but as I promised last night, if there were any significant changes, we'd take a look at the GCSA tournament fact sheet when it was released. Not necessarily significant changes, but I do want to call to your all's attention this note here where a few of the fairways have been narrowed. Maybe not by a lot, but they have been narrowed. Now, is that going to make as much of a difference in terms of looking at off the tee versus not, or anything to that effect? I highly doubt it, but I did want to at least bring to your all's attention that they have narrowed a few of these fairways, but everything else is legitimately just the same. It's still a DA Waybury design, obviously. The yardage is still listed at right under 7,300 yards as a par 71. We're still looking at fast bent greens, 4-inch long bluegrass and fescue rough. Only 3 holes with water in play, so the only change was this note about how a few of the fairways have been narrowed. So with that, let's go ahead and go to our usual start on a Monday evening with the extended look of the forecast here at Windfinder. It looks like Silvis is expected to get quite a bit of rain on Tuesday, especially overnight. You're looking at 3/4 of an inch late on Tuesday to an inch early Wednesday morning. So a lot of rain getting dumped supposedly in the Quad Cities area before the tournament. A lot of wind as well on Tuesday. And then Thursday looks okay. High in the mid-70s. Pretty pleasant. Maybe wind picking up a little bit, but then Friday and Saturday look horrendous in terms of the amount of wind. Sustained winds in the mid-teens, gusts, maybe as much as in the mid-20s. So very, very difficult playing conditions, even with what you would expect to be soft course conditions if they do indeed get this amount of rain tomorrow. And then Sunday looks windy as well, with gusts near 40 late in the day on Sunday. So very clearly it looks like wind, at least in terms of an extended look, is going to be a big factor this week at TPC Deere Run. There's a look at our extended forecast for the week. So with that, we will move to Fantasy National, and thanks to that forecast that we just looked at, we're going to take a look at some wind performance for the players in the field this week. Before we do that, there have been 3 field changes that I have seen so far. The biggest one, probably the tournament favorite, Patrick Cantlay, has decided not to play. Patrick Cantlay has withdrawn. Last week's winner at the Rocket Mortgage, Cam Davis, has withdrawn, and Taylor Montgomery has withdrawn. So these 3 players are no longer in the field. Make sure you adjust if you have already submitted some lineups or had a lot of research going in already, that you adjust that these 3 players are no longer in the field. But for those that are still in the field this week at the John Deere Classic, in the past 2 years, in moderate and windy conditions, your top performers have been Jordan Spieth, Denny McCarthy, Harry Hall, Patrick Rogers, Sung Jae, Carson Young, Andrew Novak, Adam Schenk, Brendan Todd, and Eric Cole. Again, skipping Patrick Cantlay, he has decided not to play this week. The only other thing that we are going to take, kind of or use in terms of a filter often is this easy relative to par filter. Now, there haven't been a whole lot of rounds here at whoops, that is not what I wanted. I want the historic conditions. There haven't been a lot of rounds that have been windy, some moderate, a few moderates, but no windy rounds. That's really is the defense of the course, other than the long rough that is prominent around TPC Deere Run. I still have to believe that this course will be easy for professionals, even given the amount of wind that is in the forecast. You see, we have had a few rounds of moderate. That's generally when it plays to average, and even with some moderate wind, it still has played easy. So I still don't think we're going to be using anything other than this easy relative to par filter. I am a little less confident in it, at least with the extended forecast. And come Wednesday night, at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show, we'll really focus in on that forecast. But in rounds that are easy relative to par in the past 2 years, our top performers have been Bo Hostler, Sung Jae, Chan Kim, Doug Gim, Ben Coles, Ryo Hitsatsune, Luke List, Michael Kim, Ben Griffin, and JT Poston. Again, skipping Patrick Cantlay, he has withdrawn. So there's a look at a couple of big picture views, if you will, with some easy relative to par filter, some wind, considering the forecast that we looked at in Fantasy National, in Wind Finder. But what I really want to do and start gearing up for is taking a look at these prior leaderboards and figure out what metrics and filters and all of that we want to look at and focus on as we move forward this week, as we prep for our mixed condition model come Wednesday night. So let's take a look at last year's John Deere Classic with Sepp Straka winning. We'll take a look at 2022 as well and figure out what stats and player types have fared well the past couple of years. So looking at the top 16 here, just due to ties, we do have a couple of players negative in terms of off the tee, but really only one was bad. It was Mark Hubbard. You got Brendan Todd and Seamus Power, who were just slightly below field average. Only a couple players negative in approach. But what you won't see is anybody negative in putting. You have to putt well here to perform at TPC Deere Run, as it generally does turn into a putting contest. I mean, you see even players like Alex Smalley, I mentioned this last night, who typically is not a very good putter, gained putting here last year. Kevin Yu, notoriously a pretty bad putter, gained 8 last year. Now, putting is extremely volatile, so you can't count on this. And, you know, especially in the sense of Kevin Yu, he's only played it once, played the John Deere Classic once. So this is an extremely small sample size beyond that. But with players like Smalley and Hideki and Luke List and these notoriously bad putters, if they show that they are comfortable on greens at a certain place, the most striking example to me is Hideki at the Genesis. For whatever reason, he just putts well there. He sees those greens well. So it's interesting to keep an eye on players like this, especially considering you would expect Kevin Yu to ball strike it a lot better. He's generally, his baseline is much better than this, but his putting's a lot lower than this. Same with players like Alex Smalley. But again, taking a look at last year, nobody negative in putting, so we're going to have decent amount of weight in putting as well, especially on fast bent greens. Off the tee, a little bit surprising to me, considering that so many players were positive in that regard. Now, it's not a whole lot of direct correlation. You had Brent Grant, who missed the cut, was very good off the tee, but did not hit his irons or putt well. You've got some decent amount of cut making, but not really a whole lot of correlation. You do have a top 25, top 15, and then top 5. But Gordon Sargent struggled after he made the cut. Lonto Griffin struggled after he made the cut. Your winner was somewhat high up here. Top 20 from Peter Quest, top 20 from Troy Merritt. It's okay. It's better than, it's more correlating or better correlation than I was giving it credit for last night, I think. But it's still not a whole lot. Irons, kind of where it's at. You got your runner-up, top 15. I'll be generous because say a top 25 or just right outside of it. You have a decent amount of cut making. Only one miscut from Sam Ryder, who struggled on the greens. That's why he missed the cut. But a lot of good cut making here around the green. Really only Neesmith performed exceptionally well. Then you're pretty quickly into the 3s and the 2s. Whereas off the tee, kind of the same. You have more 3s than in the around the green. You don't have any missed cuts, but not a whole lot of correlation. But where it's at, I mean, very, very clearly is about the putting. Kevin Yu, JT Poston, Brendan Todd, all of these players in the top 10. Really the lowest is, top 25 from Nick Hardy and Chris Kirk that are extremely high up here. I mean, Chesson Hadley putt well, but didn't do a damn thing else well. So last year it was about the putting. And then in 2022, we'll take a look at, gosh dang it, the strokes gained. Top 15 just due to ties. Very similarly, only one player negative in putting. It was Chris Goddard, who was really, really good at everything else. Off the tee, not a single player negative in off the tee. Now, there's not a whole lot to be gained here. There's a 4.5, a 4.7, a 4, 4.3, which is leading, but it's pretty darn correlating. Other than Ernst with a pretty clunker of a made cut, top 10, a runner-up, top 10, top 5. So off the tee, at least based on these prior leaderboards, is something that we need to take more into consideration than what I was giving it credit for last night. Look at the approach, solid. Only Wesley Bryan missed the cut with a solid approach game. You see Poston pretty high up here. Nothing outside of the top 30 except for a couple like Dylan Wu, who struggled on the greens. That's why he fell on the leaderboard. Aaron Baddeley, generally a pretty darn good putter, just had a bad week it looks like. The approach is pretty solid. Again, putting, not as correlating as last year's John Deere, but you don't see any missed cuts up here. top 10, a top 25, a runner-up, top 30, 25, 20, so solid. So really the big change, at least from last night, is I think we're going to be looking a little bit more into this off the tee. And I'm still thinking about how I want to approach that. Do we just want to look at off the tee kind of in a narrow view, in the sense of, do we want to take a look into, say, like last 24 rounds without a filter? Do we want to look at off the tee when rounds are easy to par, like we did for the Rocket Mortgage? It's interesting decisions we have to think about. So let's go ahead and take a look at the strokes gained page view and the players in the field this week. I guess we'll start with just the past 3 months and 24 rounds. Just get a good idea of the players who are in form with off the tee and approach. So your top off the tee players the past 24 rounds: Keith Mitchell, Kevin Doherty, Alejandro Tosti, Jordan Spieth, Luke Clayton, Patrick Fishburne, Rico Hoey, Aaron Rai, Kevin Yu, and Johnny Vegas are your top 10 in terms of off the tee in the recency, only because we're going to look at this same way in the approach. The last 24 rounds or 3 months, top approach players: Kevin Yu, Sepp Straka, Aaron Rai, Lonto Griffin, J.J. Spawn, Lee Hodges, Kelly Craft, Keith Mitchell, Chan Kim, and Ben Griffin. So really put a star next to Kevin Yu, who has ball struck it well, very, very well in the past 24 rounds. Aaron Rai, 5th and 3rd. Keith Mitchell, 1st and 8th. I know he's coming off a missed cut, but has ball struck it well. Honorable mentions here to Chan Kim, 23rd and 9th. Sepp Straka, 20th and 1st. Joel Damon, 18th and 12th. I mean, even Adam Svensson, top 25 in both. Daniel Berger, top 20 in both of the ball striking categories. Mav McNeely, top 25 in both. So make sure you give those players probably a decent boost in your considerations, considering off the tee is going to play probably a little bit more of a factor than I thought it would. And of course, we're going to focus on the approach. I do want to take a look at off the tee in a couple of different ways. I think the most logical would be when rounds are easy to par. So when rounds are easy, your top off the tee players in the past 2 years or 36 rounds: Cameron Champ, Kevin Yu, Keith Mitchell, Tyler Duncan, Sam Stevens, who was quite a surprising top 10 for me, and probably led to some of his success at the Rocket Mortgage. You see, he gained 2.5 off the tee. That was very, very easy last week. Also gained 5.5 on the greens. You don't expect that, but performed very well off the tee. So somebody to think about. MJ Duffy, Adam Schenk, Callum Tarrant, Doug Gim, and Ryan Palmer, your top 10 in terms of off the tee when rounds are easy relative to par. Not sure I want to take a look at anything specific with wind. We did take a look at total performance. That's generally how I look at wind performance. So now we'll just take a look at some putting. We're going to put a lot of emphasis into this thanks to what we saw in the past couple of leaderboards, couple of years of leaderboards. And we are going to filter on the fast bent greens due to the fact that basically every round the past 2 years has been fast. It has been sped up much more in the recency since 2019. More so in 2018 and before, you had a lot of rounds of average, but since 2019 and forward, it's basically been fast. Now, we'll have to see how much rain is dropped on the golf course between now and the start of the tournament. That could adjust the tee or the green speeds. But right now, we'll just assume that they're going to be fast. So on fast bent greens in the past 2 years, your top putters have been Denny McCarthy, JT Poston, Harry Hall, Sung Jae, Harry Higgs, Justin Lauer, Mav McNeely, Brendan Todd, Chesson Hadley, and Adam Svensson. Again, skipping Taylor Montgomery, he has withdrawn. So there is a look at your top putters, and don't be surprised when these players rise a little bit higher than what you might think, considering putting is going to be a pretty big facet come Wednesday night in the mixed condition model. If we want to take a look at just in the immediacy of putting, we can do that as well. I am still going to go last 36 rounds just because putting takes a while. It takes longer than the ball striking to normalize, to use some data terms, some statistician terms. But in terms of recent putting form, your top putters, it's the last 3 months, that's fine. Denny McCarthy, S.H. Kim, Tyson Alexander, Matt Kuchar, J-Day, Sean O'Hare, Vincent Whaley, Austin Cook, Justin Lauer, and Ben Silverman. So really highlighting Denny McCarthy there. No surprise, that is the strength of his game. Obviously the putter, number one in strokes gained putting the last 3 months. Number one on fast bent greens the past 36 rounds. So a lot to like there. We'll get this set for fairways and greens. We'll take a look at last year's John Deere. Not a lot stands out to me here, with the exception of maybe good drives, but these numbers aren't big by good drives gained, in relative to other tournaments. You see the distance, pretty hit and miss. It can help you, but players like Kevin Yu generally will gain distance. He was negative last year. Denny McCarthy is not long. He gained. So it's not really that big of a deal. I don't see fairways really being that big of a deal, at least statistically. 63rd lead. You got a miscut somewhat up here. Now you have some elite performances in fairways, but I don't see a whole lot here. Distance is not anything at all. If we look at good drives, about the same as fairways, maybe. The miscut is a little bit further down. I don't know. It's not great. Not great. Greens. This is, again, where it would be at, but I've just got a sneaking suspicion on good drives gained, I think. Although your winner will tied for the lead in greens at 9. Okay. But these greens are relatively easy to hit. If we recall from last night's course breakdown, these greens are pretty relatively easy to hit. The fairways are generally relatively easy to hit. So I struggle with believing that we want to look at greens. I would think good drives gained, just because a good drive gained defined by Fantasy National as a drive that hits the fairway or the player hits the green in regulation if they are in the rough. I would think good drives gained, but I'm not sold on it. We look at 2 years ago in JT Poston's win, fairways and greens. Now, distance was a little bit more correlating in 2022, although our winner is not long, JT Poston. You see Goddard and Grillo, Taryn and Cam Davis, all with massive numbers here in the distance. Again, it's in this good drives gained or maybe greens, where you only had a couple players negative in good drives gained. Really, only one was any significant negative in good drives gained. You had a couple in the greens. If we sort, our winner was second in terms of good drives gained. You also had a top 10, a runner-up, another top 10, a couple of high missed cuts. Whereas in the greens, That's pretty darn solid at the extreme top. Falls off slightly there, but it might be greens. I don't know. So we'll move to this year's field. Anything I look at on this page view is probably going to be looked at with the easy relative to par filter. So we'll expand this out to the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, win rounds have been easy relative to par. Your top good drives gained players, again defined as a good drive as a player has hit the fairway or they still hit the green in regulation if they miss the fairway. Those players are Aaron Rye, Bryce Garnett, Tyler Duncan, Joel Damon, Kelly Craft, Ches Reavie, JJ Spawn, Daniel Berger, Ryo Hitsatsune, and Bo Hostler. Top greens gained players win rounds are easy. Rye, Hostler, Hitsatsune, Damon, Russell Knox, Tyler Duncan, Bryce Garnett, Pearson Coody, Doug Gim, and Rico Hoey. So a lot of overlap here. A lot of overlap. You know, Rye and Hostler, Hitsatsune, Damon, they're top 10 in both. Duncan, Garnett, top 10 in both. The only new players from good drives to greens would be Russell Knox, who would be an honorable mention regardless. 12th in good drives, 5th in greens. Pearson Coody, a little bit less in terms of good drives. He's 45th. Rico Hoey, 50th in good drives, but cracked the top 10 in terms of greens. It is important to note, like Pearson Coody made the cut at the Rocket Mortgage. You know, wasn't necessarily all that great, but you see the off the tee game was extremely strong. And Rico Hoey had a very, very good Rocket Mortgage with a T6. Wasn't necessarily the great off the tee, but his iron play was great and he putt well. So interesting to see that they are popping on the greens at least. So I'm not sure in which direction I want to go with on that at the moment. Again, I'm leaning towards the good drives, but it's hard to ignore from the prior leaderboards that the greens were a pretty big factor. We'll move to scoring. Last night, or coming into last night's show, I would have thought it was all about the birdies are better. And then we looked at the players who consistently play John Deere, or the John Deere, the best. They were actually slightly outperforming the birdies with the bogeys avoidance. So this is going to be an interesting case study for me tonight. Again, this top 16, one player negative in bogey avoidance, none in bogey and birdies gained. A lot more to be gained in the birdies gained. So not only is it more consistent, there's also more to be gained. Our winner led in birdies gained. First, fourth, sixth, sixth, pretty solid there. Whereas we sort of the bogeys, you had a miscut somewhat high up here. This is why I believed that it was going to be the birdies gained. Just because there's so much more to be gained here. In fact, nobody in the top 20 was negative with birdies gained at least last year. And you see there are a few eagles to be had around TBC Deere Run. If we look at 2022, JT Poston's win. Top 15. Not a single player negative in either one. This one was much more balanced looking. If we sort, pretty solid. A couple top 25s and a top 30 up here a little bit high. Bogey avoidance. See, now bogey avoidance in 2022 was much more correlating. 15 or top 15, runner up, winner, runner up, top 10, top 5, top 10, top 15. So a little bit of both, to be honest with you, a little bit of both. So with that, I think it's still more prudent to look at birdies or better gained, but I think we can look at both. We're absolutely going to look at opportunities as well, since this becomes a putting contest a lot of times, and with the amount of rain that is in the forecast, I could see the course being soft. We saw what soft conditions does at the Rocket Mortgage for professionals. They just fire at flags and it becomes a big birdie fest. So that's the way I'm leaning right now, but it's hard to ignore the importance of the bogey avoidance as well. So win rounds have been easy relative to par the past couple of years. Your top birdies or better gained players: Eric Cole, Chan Kim, S.H. Kim, Sep Straka, Sung Jae, Ryo Hitsatsune, Luke List, Scott Piercy, Patrick Rogers, and JT Poston. We look at bogey avoidance. Win rounds have been easy. Doug Gim, Bo Hostler, Ryan Moore, Grayson Sigg, Aaron Rye, JJ Spawn, Matt Kuchar, Ben Silverman, Austin Cook, and Party Marty Laird. And then finally, we'll take a look at opportunities, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to include some opportunities into this with that forecast. Your top opportunities gained players. Win rounds have been easy relative to par: Smalley, Joel Damon, Carson Young, Lucas Glover, Adam Shank, Sung Jae, Kevin Yu, Doug Gim, Daniel Berger, and Adam Svensson. All right. Interested to take a look at proximity. I believe last night, if there was a range, it was the 150 to 175, but I wasn't too terribly confident in it. Maybe total procs, since there seemed to be a pretty even amount of approach shots across all the different ranges. So as we look from last year, total procs is a little bit of something, but look at this 200 plus. And anytime I see that, I immediately go to par 5 performance, just because these par 5s are going to get attacked in 2. So I'm interested to see how well these players played the par 5s. They played them pretty well. See, McCarthy and Hubbard were the negatives, but yet they were positive and 200 plus, so not a whole lot correlating there. If we sort on total procs, fairly solid. Robbie Shelton's a fairly high miscut, but you got some pretty good correlation here. Runner-up, middling, top 10, top 5. Winners a little bit further down here. We'll look at 200 plus. Kind of falls apart a little bit. Martin Laird was very, very high, but did not make the cut. Clunkers here. So at least based on last year, it was total procs. Okay, 150 to 175. Extremely strong on top and then falls rapidly. And 2 years ago, JT Poston's win, proximity, he was nowhere near proximity with total procs 2 years ago, and yet wins. That's why I don't think total procs is going to be something. Hey, Darnell, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in chat. I will have to say it's a couple weeks old now, but you were completely correct with the Travelers being extremely easy. It's probably something that I'm going to have to adjust in my thought process when thinking about the Travelers, because you mentioned how easy that course is. I was just going by Fantasy National, how it was mostly labeled as average, and then we saw what happened there a couple weeks ago. It turned into a birdie fest. So do want to give you your fair share of credit there, that you were spot on with it being extremely easy. Back at it, let's make some money. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks for me. I used to work literally right down the street. Well, I know you were local to there. I believe you said something 20 to 30 minutes from the course. So yeah, it's good information, and I wanted to make sure I gave you your proper due for shouting out how easy it would be that week. But yeah, it's been a pretty rough couple of weeks for me. I did play the 150 penny contest on DraftKings. That was an interesting experience, making 150 lineups for the same contest. But hopefully you've had success. You had a successful Rocket Mortgage. Mine was not very good. So we're going to try to turn our fortunes around, or at least I'm going to try to turn my fortunes around for the John Deere. But turning back to, we're both down. Yeah, well, let's try to fix that this week. Turning back to the proximity from 2 years ago, I don't see a whole lot in total procs. The 200 plus, it's kind of. Baseball's been doing you good. Yeah, I wish I had some more time to devote to baseball, but my own baseball season, I still play in a pretty competitive men's baseball league. That's been going now for 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so. So I haven't been able to devote as much time to it. But I'm glad to hear you're having success with it. So I don't see too much here in terms of total procs or anything with proximity here at the John Deere. So let's just go ahead and go straight to the par threes. I just don't see much with proximity, and if that changes, I'll explain it come Wednesday night. But we look at last year's par threes. There's a little bit to be gained here, but not a whole lot. Nothing in terms of a specific range, considering we have one par three that falls into each of these range buckets. At 200 to 225 would be the most, maybe. But again, there's not a lot to be gained there, I don't think. 2022 par threes. Yeah, I mean, your winner was only at a 1.5. Like, most of these players are playing them well, or playing them, acceptable. But it's like, if you sort on them, not great. Not great in terms of correlation. They're just not losing a whole bunch on them. So I think it's probably appropriate to maybe look at par threes in terms of total, like maybe 5% in the mixed condition model, but I'm not terribly confident that par threes are going to contribute a lot. So your top par three performers in the field this week in the last 24 rounds: David Skins, Sam Stevens, Nate Lashley, Parker Cootie, Lee Hodges, Kelly Craft, Bud Cauley, McCarthy, Daniel Berger, Campillo, and Davis Thompson. And again, any weight on the par threes come Wednesday night is going to just be about 5%. Just don't see a lot here. Conversely, there's going to be a decent amount in these par fours, particularly in the 400 to 450 and maybe even a little bit of the 450 to 500. Yes, we do have two short par fours, one that turns into a drivable one, but you see there's not a whole lot to be gained here, just a tenth, 2/10 maybe from Denny McCarthy, but not a lot to be gained. Instead, it's in this 400 to 450. Half of our par fours at TPC Deere Run fall into this range here, and you see sorted on this, your winner led in that category, first, sixth, fourth, pretty solid overall. If we sort on the par fours, a lot to be gained there as well. 2022 and the par fours, again, Poston. Don't think he led, but he was pretty darn close. So top 20, top 10, a top 25 winner, top 10. A lot to do in these 400 to 450 par fours and par fours in general. Let's get this set for the par fives just very quickly. So your top performers in par fours, 400 to 450, and I'll explain why when we get to Microsoft Excel, why I'm kind of focusing on this range. Top par four performers, 400 to 450, Mac Meisner, Kevin Yu, Pearson Cootie, Alex Smalley, Sepp Straka, Ryo Hitsatsune, Adam Svensson, Kevin Streelman, Andrew Putnam, and Sungjae. Lastly, for par fives, all three fall between 550 and 600 here at TPC Deere Run. Now, they will move tees and pins. You see some of them play under less than, or they can play less than 550. They can play over 600. But all three on the scorecard measure to here. And that's where the majority of our strokes gained are for the pros, is in this 550 to 600. So your top par 5 performers from 550 to 600: Bridgman, JJ Spawn, Sungjae, Seamus Power, Davis Riley, Keith Mitchell, Chesson Hadley, Martin Trainer, Nate Lashley, Aaron Rye. All right, with that, let's go ahead. I'm going to reset this to the strokes gained. Let's go to some deep, detailed data around the John Deere as we move to Microsoft Excel. You see, in the past 4 years, I only go back 5 total years, and 2020 was canceled for 2020 reasons, so we only have 4 years of data to work with. But let's get a feel for what stats, what metrics the top performers year over year at the John Deere have been doing well. And as I mentioned a couple of times now throughout the show, I'm going to need to give off the tee a little bit more weight than what I thought it was last night. It's been fairly consistent. It has fallen off the past 3 years slowly, but it's been fairly consistent, and it's a half a shot more. Gosh dang it, half a shot more than the around the green. It's only 1 shot behind the approach, but the putting has been the most important. We saw that in the prior leaderboards. So we're going to focus on the putting, absolutely, fast bent greens. Iron play is not to be ignored. We are going to factor in some off the tee, considering how much more it's a factor as opposed to the around the green. If we were to compare John Deere and TPC Deere Run versus other full field courses on the PGA Tour, like off the tee is actually 25% more. So definitely something that we need to factor in. Absolutely. I'm a little skeptical with this driving distance being that high, because I don't think distance is mandatory, but at least for the players that have finished in the top 30, it has been something. These fairways are generous. They are easy to hit, so it would make some sense that the more distance, the better, especially with fairways being easy to hit. But I'm just not as confident in that. I feel like I'm focused just on the off the tee per se, as opposed to the distance. But it's hard to ignore that data there. Nothing in fairways. You see they've actually declined year over year in importance. This good drives gain number is fairly high, and it's been very consistent, something I appreciate as a statistician. I want to see consistency in statistics. Good drives gained, 22% more important than the average full field course on the PGA Tour. And in fact, greens, 20%. So might be something where we're looking at both of those. I don't like looking at both of them, but we might, considering what the data is showing here. Because that's a pretty big number for good drives gained. That's 2.8. And 3.6 is fairly solid for greens as well. Interesting. Moving to scoring. Again, the higher number, the more to be gained is in the birdies gained, as you would expect. It's actually been fairly consistent as well. That's why I thought coming into the week I was just going to be focused on birdies are better gained. But bogey avoidance is pretty close too. So maybe I know we're going to be looking at birdies are better gained when rounds are easy in the mixed condition model come Wednesday. And I know for a fact we're going to put in some opportunities as well based on that forecast with all the rain that they're supposed to get in Silvis, Illinois leading up to the tournament. I think it'll be soft. And when you have soft greens, receptive greens, professionals just fire at flags. So I think I know opportunities, I know birdies are better. We might consider bogey avoidance. I'm not sold on it. Moving to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Like I was mentioning, there's just not a whole lot to be gained in any specific range of par 3. I mean, this is about a little less than 30% of your total in par 3s. So anything we do with par 3s will be total par 3s. It'll be 5%, but there's not a specific range, it looks like. Whereas, gosh dang it, I hit the wrong thing. There it is. Apologies. When we go to par 4s, half of our par 4s at the John Deere are in the 400 to 450. It's been really darn consistent with the exception of this one. I can't even call it an extremely low outlier. It is a low outlier, but it's not extremely low. It's been fairly consistent. It's been fairly consistent year over year at the John Deere as well. Par 4s has just been, in general, very consistent. What I'm thinking is focusing on the 400 to 450 and maybe putting 5% in the 450 to 500, because this is a very low outlier for them, and really just kind of ignoring the others. I know there's a par 4 that ranges or that falls into this range. I know we'd be ignoring 2 of the other par 4s, but at least in terms of the data, really it all comes into these 2 ranges of par 4s. So that's why I'm thinking about just looking at these 2 ranges come Wednesday night in the mixed condition model. I know we're going to be looking at this range by itself, considering half of the strokes gained total in par 4s fall into this range, and half of the par 4s at TPC Deere Run fall into this range. So I know we'll be looking at this range by itself. I'm still debating with myself whether I want to look at like 5% total par 4s or bump this percentage and do like 5% 450 to 500. So things to consider as we move forward this week. Lastly, par 5s. I mean, 75% almost in the 550 to 600, and that's why we only looked at that range in Fantasy National, and it's gained year over year as well. It's just, this is the range of par 5s, and that's all we're going to be looking at. So if we took a quick look, like par 3s, there's not a whole lot to be gained. Nothing in any specific range. Par 4s, like 7% more important, but look at the 400 to 450. That's why I'm kind of harping on that. And then the par 5s are exactly dead even with the average full field course. It's all in there. I do want to see the procs. So total procs a little bit. 150 to 175 is a pretty big number. I don't know. I just don't see enough in a specific range of proximity that would warrant a look. Because if we looked at the 200 plus, that to me is signified by the par 5s. That's just representing the players who are going for these greens in 2. That's why I'm not focused on the 200 plus proximity. But if you disagree, feel free to put it in chat or put it in the comments if you think I'm off base with my analysis. But there's a look at some detailed data around TPC Deere Run since 2019. We'll move to last year's mixed condition model. Take a look at what I looked at, how good it was in terms of predictability and results, see what we might need to change for this year. So right off the bat, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of my top 20 missed the cut. A little bit too high. I shoot for 4 to 5. My number 1 player missed the cut. That's never a good sign. Taylor Moore. Let's see. I had a couple of top 10s here from Cam Young and Mark Hubbard. Dylan Wu was very popular who missed the cut. McCarthy. The winner, Sepp Straka, was 50th. So not great. So definitely leaving a lot to be desired in terms of results. So what did I look at? I had 15% off the tee when it's easy to par. I mean, considering where I was at the beginning of the week, I think this is an overreaction. I think maybe 5 to 10%. But it's very clear that off the tee probably needs to be factored in some kind of small way. 15% birdies are better gained when rounds are easy. Makes a lot of sense. John Deere is generally pretty darn easy course for professionals, if I could talk. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, 15% 400 to 450 par 4s. 15% 550 to 600 par 5s. So far, all of this makes sense, except for this is probably a little bit too high a percentage. But everything else makes sense. 10% bent. I didn't separate out a speed. again, makes a lot of sense considering all of the speed readings had been average or fast. Now with 2 years of data every single round being fast, I think we can err to the side of being fast bent. But yeah, 10% in putting makes a lot of sense. I did look at 10% in par fours. Okay, 5% good drives gained with long rough. Okay, I would have thought maybe looking at this with easy to par. But okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, considering the long rough is the only real defense the course has. Makes some sense. And then 5% in par threes. Anything I do with par threes will be in terms of total par threes and only 5%. So how predictive were these? We had 152 players in the field last year. So I'm looking for something in the low 50s, preferably in the 40s. These were actually fairly solid, which is surprising considering how poor the results were. Off the tee wasn't great. It was middling. Birdies are better. Pretty darn solid. The par fours, okay. Not great, but okay. Now, the par 5 performance was bad. So the players who finished, I believe this was the top 25, weren't very predictive on their par 5 performance. Okay. Approach, solid. 46. Looks like it's the best one of here. The approach and the birdies are better. Putting, very volatile statistics, so that wasn't very predictive. Par 4s were good. Good drives gained. In long rough was good. Par 3s were actually fairly solid. A sub 50. So really, predictability-wise, this was a pretty darn good model. It just didn't turn out well in results. If we sort on how it ended up, for example, the par 5s, like Sepp Straka had been horrible at that range of par 5s. And I don't think he played them all that well last year. I'd have to double check. In fact, let's do that. I'm just out of curiosity. We'll take a look at Sepp Straka and how, I know the vision skewed, I apologize, but I'm interested to see how he played those par 5s last year. And okay. 3.3. 2.7 in it. 2.7 of his 3.3 in the 550 to 600. So he played them better than he had been leading into it. That's can't really predict for that. Some of these players were pretty good, but look at down here. Very, very poor with par 5 performance of that specific range. Yet they finished in the top 15. So that's why this was not a very predictable statistic. What is, or at least what was last year, look at how good the iron form was for these players. 4th, 1st, 2nd, 20th. So approach is going to be pretty solid. Approach is going to be pretty darn solid. Need to add some weight to that. But that is a look at last year's mixed condition model. What went well, what didn't, what I looked at, what needs to change for this year's mixed condition model. And with that, we're going to move to, as soon as I finalize what I'm trying to do here, we're going to move to the early look file and take a look at performance, specifically at TPC Deere Run, in these metrics that we think we want to focus on this week. So remember, there's no 2020, so there's only 4 years of data in here. We'll start with off the tee. Who's been our best off the tee players at TPC Deere Run the last 4 years? All of these players, it's just one time, so you know, small sample size and all that. James Hahn has not done anything else well, but he's been good off the tee. He's 2 for 2. Cameron Champ, kind of his game. Alex Smalley, Lipsky, Hardy, 2 for 2. Average of a 26th place finish is not bad. Jim Herman, Mav McNeely, McCarthy, Glover, Sig. If we look at iron play, your top iron players, specifically at TPC Deere run the last 4 years. Goddard, it was just one time. Lucas Glover, 3 for 4. And he's also putt well here, somebody to think about. Former champion in 2021. Grayson Sig, 2 for 2. Average finish inside the top 15. Doug Gim, 2 for 3. Again, that's kind of his game. Alex Smalley again. Ball striking it very, very well. And he's actually putt okay, because he's not a very good putter. Johnny Vegas, Luke List. Look at that. Another player who has been who's very, very bad at putting. It's only one time, but he was field average. So probably something to take a look at there. Mark Hubbard, 3 for 3. Adam Schenk, 3 for 3. Average finish inside the top 5. He's been very good with his irons. Neesmith, Power. Brian Moore, 3 for 4. Putting and approach. It's a very good combination. Martin Laird, 3 for 4. Your top putters at TPC Deere Run over the past 4 years. Again, Kevin Yu, only one time. Don't get carried away with it because he's not a very good putter. He probably just had a very good week. Lauer, Wu, Thompson. So there's Mav McNeely, Brendan Todd, Adam Schenk. Svensson has performed very well here and putt very well. Dylan Fratelli is a former champion, 2019. Sung Jae, Nick Hardy, Poston. It's interesting to see Denny McCarthy's a little bit further down here in terms of putting at the John Deere Classic. Still putting fine, just he's not near the top. I do want to show you all some of the research from earlier today, so we're going to skip ahead to let's go birdies gained. Your top birdies gained players at TPC Deere Run. Again, Kevin Yu, Luke List. So Sepp Straka, our defending champion, much more in the birdies. Johnny Vegas has been good here, 2 for 2. Nick Hardy, Glover, Schenk, Brendan Todd, Svensson. Gosh dang it. Svensson's at a 3.2. Ryan Moore, McNeely, Hubbard. We'll just take a look at par 4s, 400, 450, and then look at the research. So, par 4s, 400, 450. Colley only one time. Davis Thompson, Mav McNeely. Here's Brendan Todd again. Sean O'Hare. Lot to be desired in terms of finish. He hasn't played the par 5s well, but he's been good at these par 4s. Ryan Moore, Adam Schenk, Doug Gim, Patton Gazire, Neesmith, Hubbard, McCarthy, Svensson. All right, I'll sort this on best finish. And we'll finish the show off with a look at the research that I posted today over on social media. So, first thing I want to show you all, and why it's not a factor, is the winner matrix. Again, this is highlighting performance leading up to a player's win at the John Deere. So, Sepp Straka, top 30 in 2019 in his first go-around. Missed the cut, didn't play, and then wins. So not a whole lot of correlation there. Look at JT Poston. 2 missed cuts before he wins. And then a 64th and a 65th, nothing there. Dylan Fratelli had never played the John Deere Classic and wins in 2019. Lucas Glover had some pretty good success and then wins. So why I'm showing you this is that I am not putting a whole lot of emphasis into prior performance at the John Deere. Players like Lucas Glover, you can probably take a look at. Players like Ryan Moore, they generally play well here. You don't want to ignore them, but prior success here is not mandatory at all. Again, see Sepp Straka, see JT Poston. Dylan Fratelli had never played before. Bryson winning in 2017. Missed the cut his only time. Didn't even play the year prior to his win, and then wins. So prior course performance is not going to be a big deal this week. Instead, I want to focus your attention on recent form. So this is every champion, going back to 2012, every champion's most recent event before the John Deere. Now, you don't have a lot of overwhelming success. You do have a runner-up. You do have a win in 2015 from Jordan Spieth, who won the U.S. Open, then wins the John Deere. I mean, 2015 was just a phenomenal year for Spieth. You don't have a lot of extreme success, but you only have 2 players that missed the cut in their previous event. So, recent, and I mean recent form seems to be a thing. Look at these players off the tee. Only 1 player negative off the tee in the past 10 champions. Yes, Zach Johnson was negative. He would have been 11 years ago. So of the last 10 winners, all but 1 has been positive and off the tee. Again, USGA, their stats are proprietary. I have to imagine this is at least field average. If Jordan Spieth wins the U.S. Open, he has to be at least field average and off the tee, would be my guess. Maybe not. I mean, his distance and fairways were lower, so maybe that is negative, but at least of the gained or the statistics that Fantasy National is able to gather, all but 1 was positive and off the tee. Again, only a couple missed cuts. And let's take a look at some recent form. So last year, Sepp Straka. This is going back a couple of months, give or take a couple of days, depending on how tournaments fall in the schedule. Like the John Deere last year was on July 9th. This is going back to May 7th. So give or take a couple of days. This is a couple of months. Take a look at this. Sepp Straka had a top 20 and a top 10. You look at JT Poston. He had 2 top 10s in the 2 months preceding the John Deere Classic. 2021, Lucas Glover had a top 10. The only player that really doesn't fit this is Dylan Fratelli. He even had a top 25 at the Wells Fargo in 2019. And he's the outlier here. He's the one that doesn't fit. He still had a top 25. Michael Kim in 2018, a top 20. 2 top 20s, a top 20. So recent form is a pretty big deal with the John Deere. So look for players who have had at least 1 top 20, preferably even a top 10 in the past couple of months. As we see here, again, Fratelli kind of the outlier. Michael Kim only had a top 20. Bryson had 2 top 20s in 2017. And then the green here is easy. And I made a note of this on social media, but I define an easy tournament as 2 rounds of easy to relative to par and no rounds that are difficult. So you could have 2 easy and 2 average, 3 easy, 1 average, all easy. So long as a round isn't difficult relative to par and half of them are rated easy relative to par, I consider that an easy tournament. Let's take a look. Not necessarily a whole lot of success, but they're not missing the cut. They are not missing the cut in these easy tournaments. None of them. Not missing the cut. Not missing the cut. Top 20 even from 2016 winner. Is that Ryan Moore? I have to cheat. Yep, Ryan Moore. So he even top 20 an easy tournament. But what you aren't going to see is a miscut in an easy tournament. So that is some of the research that led to what I posted earlier today. And if you want to see the players in the field this week who fit that criteria, go check out X and social media. My handle's in the description. You can find that research and more that I posted today and every week over there. Thanks to Darnell for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel, liking the videos, commenting and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks are much better than others. We're going to try to get back on our winning ways this week after 2 pretty poor performances. Just being transparent there. 2 pretty darn poor performances from my end. So we're going to try to get back on the winning ways. Thanks again for all the support. For all of the wagers you've made so far this week for the John Deere. For all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the John Deere. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.